Good evening, Americans. This is The Ed Show live from Los Angeles. President Obama spoke to reporters in Los Cabos, Mexico at the conclusion of the G20 summit tonight. The president said the European debt crisis created a heightened sense of urgency in the global economy.
Over the past 3 years, these G20 summits have allowed our nations to pull the global economy back from a free fall and put us back on a path of recovery and growth. In the United States, our businesses have created jobs for 27 months in a row, more than 4 million jobs in all, and our highest priority continues to be putting people back to work even faster. Today, we recognize that there are a wide range of threats to ongoing global economic recovery and growth. But the one that's received the most focus, obviously, and that is having a significant impact in the United States as well as globally is the situation in Europe. As our largest trading partner, slower growth in Europe means slower growth in American jobs. So we have a profound interest in seeing Europe prosper. And that's why I've been consulting closely with my European counterparts during this crisis, as we've done here at Los Cabos. I do think it's important to note, however, that most leaders of the Eurozone economies are not part of the G20. The challenges facing Europe will not be solved by the G20 or by the United States. The solutions will be debated and decided appropriately by the leaders and the people of Europe. So this has been an opportunity for us to hear from European leaders on the progress they're making and on their next steps, especially in the wake of the election in Greece and because they're heading into the EU summit later this month. It's also been a chance for the international community, including the United States, the largest economy in the world, and with our own record of responding to financial crises, to stress the importance of decisive action at this moment. Now, markets around the world, as well as governments, have been asking if Europe is ready to do what is necessary to hold the Eurozone together. Over the last 2 days, European leaders here in Cabos have made it clear that they understand the stakes and they pledged to take the actions needed to address this crisis and restore confidence, stability, and growth. Let me just be a little more specific. First, our friends in Europe clearly grasp the seriousness of the situation and are moving forward with a heightened sense of urgency. I welcome the important steps that they have already taken to promote growth, financial stability, and fiscal responsibility. I'm very pleased that the European leaders here said that they will take all necessary measures to safeguard the integrity and stability of the Eurozone to improve the functioning of the financial markets. This will contribute toward breaking the feedback loop between sovereigns and banks and make sovereign borrowing costs sustainable. In closing, I'd note that with Mexico's leadership, we continue to make progress across a range of challenges that are vital to our shared prosperity, from food security to green economic growth that combats climate change, from financial education and protection for consumers to combating corruption that stifles economic growth, and in strengthening financial regulation to creating a more level playing field. All of this happened in large part because of the leadership of President Calderon. I want to thank him, and I want to thank my fellow leaders for their partnership as we work very hard to create jobs and opportunity that all of our citizens deserve.
President Obama said the most important thing the United States can do to assist the world economy is pass a jobs plan. The president once again said Congress needs to take action.
All this affects the United States. Europe as a whole is our largest trading partner. And if fewer folks are buying stuff in Paris or Berlin, that means that we're selling less stuff made in Pittsburgh or Cleveland. But I think there are a couple of things that we've already done that help. The financial regulatory reforms that we passed means that our banks are better capitalized. It means that our supervision and our mechanisms for looking at trouble spots in our financial system are superior to what they were back in 2008. That's an important difference. But there's still some more things we can do. And the most important thing we can do is something that I've already talked about. If Congress would act on a jobs plan that independent economists say would put us on the path of creating an extra 1 million jobs on top of the ones that have already been created, putting teachers back in the classroom, putting construction workers back on the job, rebuilding infrastructure that badly needs to be rebuilt. All those things can make a significant difference, and given that we don't have full control over what happens in Europe or the pace at which things happen in Europe, let's make sure that we're doing those things that we do have control over and that are good policy anyway. I think it's fair to say that all these issues, economic issues, will potentially have some impact on the election. But that's not my biggest concern right now. My biggest concern is the same concern I've had over the last 3.5 years, which is folks who are out of work or underemployed or unable to pay the bills. What steps are we taking that potentially put them in a stronger position? And I've consistently believed that if we take the right policy steps, if we're doing the right thing, then the politics will follow. And my mind hasn't changed on that.
The president was also asked about political attacks made by the Romney campaign in overseas publications.
One of Mitt Romney's economic advisors recently wrote in a German publication that your recommendations to Europe and to Germany in particular reveal ignorance of the causes of the crisis, and he said that they have the same flaws as your own economic policies. With
respect to Mr. Romney's advisors, I'd suggest you go talk to Mr. Romney about his advisors. I would point out that we have one president at a time and one administration at a time. And I think traditionally the notion has been that America's political differences end at the water's edge. I'd also suggest that he may not be familiar with what our suggestions to the Germans have been.
For more on the president's news conference, I'm joined tonight by Democratic strategist Bob Shrum. Bob, what did you make of the president saying that our political differences end at the water's edge? That was a polite slap to Romney.
Yeah, it was a slap at Romney. And frankly, what Romney's guy was saying, I think, while it's crude and ugly, by the way, the cause of the crisis we know, George W. Bush's economic policies, which Mitt Romney wants to go back to. But while that comment was crude and ugly, it was done on purpose, because they want to encourage Chancellor Merkel in Germany to stick to the austerity policies. They know that that could drive the Eurozone further down. That could drive much of Europe, has already driven much of Europe into a recession, and could have fall-on effects here. They've been rooting for a recession for a long time, so they just gave a little oots to Merkel.
And the president tonight gave a little nod to Congress. You better get after it. That's the best thing you could do is pass the jobs plan. Don't make the same mistakes that they're making over in Europe. That's the way I heard it.
Yeah, well, that's what he's saying. And I don't have much faith that you're going to get the Congress to move on this. Yeah. Those Republicans said at the beginning of his term that their highest priority was to defeat Barack Obama. They're willing to sacrifice millions of American jobs if they can just get back the job of president. But the reason he said it was he was trying to put more pressure on the Europeans. He was saying, in effect, austerity doesn't work. Look at what's happening in Europe. He was using the Congress as a way to, or his comments on the Congress as a way to send that message. And if Merkel doesn't move, if she stubbornly adheres to austerity, then Germany may destroy Europe for the third time in a century, this time without firing a shot.
I want to talk about Syria. He took a number of questions on that tonight, one big question on it, and talking about the Russians and China. The president does not believe that Hafez Assad can hang in there without the political reforms. He also was very clear that Russia and China are not on board with the United States. I mean, he was very delicate the way he put that forward. How did he score?
Well, he did as well as he could have under the circumstances, because he clearly hasn't moved the Russians and the Chinese. He thinks that maybe he can move them in the next few weeks. I'm kind of skeptical of that. I think it's going to be a very tough sell. One of the problems is the Russians and Chinese think that in Libya, on that UN resolution to intervene in Libya, that they got sold a bill of goods. Yeah. They thought it was going to be a more limited intervention. They didn't know the whole purpose was going to be to throw Gaddafi out. Now, they were naive to think that. But now I think they say, look, this guy has been on our side for a long time. We have some commercial interests with him. And quite frankly, I think, you got regimes that have demonstrated in the past own people.
Speaking of the strife in Syria, President Obama made it clear that Assad has got to go.
Assad has lost legitimacy. And when you massacre your own citizens in the ways that we've seen, it is impossible to conceive of an orderly political transition that leaves Assad in power.
A lot of connection between the Russians and Syria. China, not so much. But the Russians just don't seem to be willing to tell Assad that you need to go and we want to get involved in this. I mean, the president, it was almost as if he went out there tonight. I don't want to make any news on this. We still got a lot of talking we got to do on it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk ahead, and there may never be action. We're just going to have to see. I mean, what's going on in Syria is obscene. Assad is targeting civilians, killing massive numbers of civilians. His father did this before him, though, and survived for decades. And Assad, I think, believes the repression is the way forward. He looked at what happened to Mubarak. He looked at what happened to Gaddafi, and he's going to be completely ruthless about this.
So was the president playing to a European audience tonight? Because no one wants American aggression at this point.
No, I think he's trying to nudge the Russians, and he also is trying to, I think, send assurances that he's not going to get us involved right now in another shooting war.
All right. Well, Bob Shrum, great to have you with us tonight.
Ed.
Thanks so much for joining us. Bob Shrum, Democratic strategist, with us. Coming up on The Ed Show, President Obama's new immigration policy is a big winner with Americans. But Mitt Romney still can't give a straight answer about whether he would keep it or get rid of it. Jose Antonio Vargas joins me. Stay with us. We're right back on The Ed Show.